Have you ever noticed that the word for mother sounds strikingly similar in English, Latin, Greek, and ancient Sanskrit? Well, that incredible linguistic thread is actually our very first clue in one of history's absolute most fascinating puzzles. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to decode the Vedic Age. We are investigating a massive 900-year mystery in the Indian subcontinent. This was a foundational period, stretching roughly from 1500 BC to 600 BC, that birthed some of the world's oldest surviving texts, the Vedas, and literally shaped the entire cultural and social trajectory of South Asia. It's an amazing story, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for this investigation. We'll be covering 5 key areas. First, the origins of the Aryans. Second, the archaeological record. Third, geography and rivers. Fourth, the pastoral economy. And finally, society and daily life.
Before we really get into the weeds, we need to set our temporal boundaries, because the Vedic Age is definitely not just one monolithic block of time. It's actually sharply divided into 2 distinct phases. It all kicks off around 1500 BC with the Early or Rigvedic period, named after the compilation of their oldest text, the Rigveda. But right around 1000 BC, everything shifts. This marks the start of the later Vedic period, and it was sparked by a massive technological leap, the introduction of iron. Iron literally changed their entire way of life, leading right up to the end of the Vedic Age around 600 BC.
Now that we know when we are, the immediate next question is who exactly these people were. So let's start with Section 1, Origins of the Aryans.
Okay, so first off, the term Aryan actually refers to a linguistic group speaking Indo-European languages, not a race. But where did they originally come from? Well, this debate has quite literally spanned continents, with historians proposing completely different origin theories. For instance, the German Orientalist Max Müller championed the Central Asian theory because he noticed these striking similarities in plants and animals mentioned in both the Indian Vedas and the Iranian Avesta. Meanwhile, Sir William Jones looked at those linguistic ties we mentioned earlier and argued for a European homeland. On the flip side, scholars like Dr. Sampernan and A.C. Das firmly believe the Aryans originated right in the Sapta Sindhu region of India. Then you've got Swami Dayan and Saraswati pointing to Tibet based on textual clues. And perhaps the most surprising of all, Bal Gangadhar Tilak proposed the Arctic region theory. He argued that Vedic descriptions of 6-month-long days and nights point to a polar origin. I mean, talk about a drastic climate shift. Now, we are absolutely not here to pick a winner today. We just want to show you how complex, widespread, and fiercely debated this historical puzzle truly is.
So, we have all these grand literary theories based on texts and languages. But what actually happens when we pick up a shovel? Let's pivot to Section 2, the archaeological record. This brings us to a rather dramatic realization in the study of ancient history. Just listen to this. Archaeology knows of no Aryans. Only literature knows of Aryans. This quote perfectly captures the incredible tension here. Because for all the rich, detailed narratives found in the Vedas about grand migrations and fierce epic battles, the actual dirt and ruins tell a very quiet, very different story. For the longest time, the popular story was that invading Aryans violently destroyed the pre-existing Harappan civilization. But guess what? The archaeological excavations tell us that simply isn't true. There's literally zero substantial proof of a large-scale alien invasion or mass migration around 1500 BCE. Instead, recent digs in places like Bhagwanpura in Haryana and Manda in Jammu have revealed something completely fascinating. Late Harappan pottery and the painted grayware associated with later cultures were actually found together in the exact same layers. This points toward a gradual blending and coexistence of cultures rather than some sudden violent conquest.
With that crucial context in mind, let's try to anchor these people to a physical space. Section 3, Geography and Rivers.
Their geographical footprint perfectly visualizes that major timeline shift we talked about earlier. In the early Vedic period, they were highly concentrated in the northwest, an area known as the Sapta Sindhu, or the land of the 7 rivers. But moving forward from 1000 BC onwards, things changed. Armed with brand new iron axes and tools, they were finally able to clear out dense forests and aggressively expand eastward, settling deep into the fertile Gangetic plains. Basically, their technology directly dictated their geography.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how water actually bridges the ancient world with the modern map of South Asia. Over 25 rivers are mentioned in the Rigveda, and we can still identify them today. The Sindhu is the modern Indus River, the Parashini is the Ravi, the Vitasta is the Jhelum, and the Asikni is the Chenab.
You see, these aren't just mythical, made-up streams. These are the very real waterways of the Punjab region that sustained their entire civilization.
And speaking of sustaining a civilization, the Sindhu River is mentioned a staggering 73 times in the Rigveda. 73! This frequency alone proves its absolute vital importance to their daily survival. Though it's definitely worth noting that while the Sindhu was the most referenced, the Saraswati River was considered the most pious. They actually referred to it as the mother of rivers and the best of goddesses.
Rivers mean water, and water means life. But how exactly did these folks make a living? Let's move on to Section 4, the pastoral economy.
You know, if you ever want to know what a society truly values, just look at what they write about. This data completely humanizes them. In the Rigveda, cows are mentioned 176 times and horses 215 times. They weren't obsessing over gold or building massive stone temples. For them, cattle were essentially their bank accounts and stock portfolios rolled into one. Their wealth, their status, their very survival were entirely tied to their animals. This definitively proves that the early Vedic society was deeply, fundamentally pastoral.
And because they were constantly on the move with their herds, agriculture was actually just a secondary economic activity for them, mainly for basic subsistence. They mostly grew yava, which we know today as barley. Remember, in the early Vedic period, they didn't have iron yet, and without heavy iron tools to dig deep into that tough soil, massive crop cultivation was pretty much impossible. Instead, they relied on softer copper or bronze tools, which they called yaksha, and they used fire to clear forests for shifting agriculture. Also, they didn't have coins. The whole shebang ran entirely on a barter system, likely trading cattle and goods to get whatever they needed.
So, how did a mobile cattle-herding group actually organize their families and divide up their labor? That brings us to Section 5, Society and Daily Life.
Let's see how this builds, because their society was highly structured from the ground up, and it was based entirely on kinship. The foundational building block was the kula, or the basic family unit. Multiple families would band together to form a vis, which is a clan. These clans then settled together in a grama, which translates to a village. And finally, one or more clans made up a jana, or a larger tribe. At the very top of this tribal structure sat the Raja, the tribal chief, whose absolute main job was to protect the tribe's cattle and its people.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most crucial transformations in human history. Early Vedic society was largely egalitarian. Your status wasn't locked in from day one, and your occupation was not determined by your birth. It was fluid, but as we move into the later Vedic period, we see a dramatic, permanent shift. The society gradually became rigidly stratified. It fractured into distinct classes: the warriors, the priests, and the ordinary people. This shifting dynamic laid the early groundwork for the caste system that would deeply impact the region for millennia to come.
Despite this shifting social structure, keeping the whole society running required some highly specialized skills. The texts give us this fantastic window into their daily labor. We see the Hir and Yakar, or goldsmiths, making intricate jewelry for both humans and horses. There were Takshan, the carpenters, and Vaya, the weavers. But what's really fascinating here is the social hierarchy of these jobs. Chariot makers, known as Rathakara, along with bronze smiths, held a uniquely elevated social status. Think about it. In a society that highly valued mobility, warfare, and specialized metal tools, the folks who could build a lightning-fast chariot or forge a razor-sharp bronze axe were incredibly important VIPs.
So we've tracked their mysterious origins, their migration eastward driven by the discovery of iron, and their monumental shift from egalitarian cattle herders to a complex, stratified society. The Vedic Age truly is the crucible in which the future of South Asia was forged, but wrapping up, it leaves us with a massive, provocative question to ponder. As they settled in the Gangetic Plains and their populations exploded, how exactly did these kinship-based pastoral tribes lay the groundwork for the massive, incredibly complex empires of ancient India that would soon follow? While that evolution is a fascinating story for another time, but I really hope this explainer gave you a concrete understanding of where it all began. Thanks so much for joining me on this investigation.